For those who are visiting with us, who have been talking about burnout in today's world. And in a sense, I chose to preach on this because about 3 years ago, I realized I was burnt out. It was in the middle of COVID. We were in lockdown, and I was struggling, morning by morning to get up and do the needful. My recovery began with the realization and my own admission, because it was a journey. When I started thinking that there was something wrong with me and I couldn't put my finger on it, and slowly I progressed from just feeling discouraged about my life, discouraged about my ministry, getting to the place where I recognized that this was probably depression now, because I couldn't shake it off. I couldn't man up and walk away from it. Getting to the place where I began to recognize that the pattern of my thoughts in the morning, when I'd get up at 2 a.m. in the morning, unable to sleep, were always crying out to the Lord, Lord, I want to go home. I want to come home. I'm done with life. I don't want to continue living. And getting to the place of recognizing that even those thoughts that sounded so spiritual were actually suicidal. Admitting that to myself. And finally getting to the place where I could say, I'm depressed. And I'm becoming suicidal. Moving from there to the next step, which I really struggled with, to share that with somebody and tell them, this is what is happening to me. I really struggled. I was overwhelmed by shame that I, a pastor, a leader of a church, a man of God, could be thinking about taking my life, or alternatively, be depressed. I struggled with that. And out of that came my brokenness and my cry to the Lord that He would heal me. God is good because He heard my prayer. And in the midst of all that, I had a conversation with a friend who told me, I think I know what's happening to you. And he was the first person I really talked with about what I was going through. And he helped me acknowledge that I was burnt out, that I was depressed, that I had become suicidal, and that I needed help. But I cried out to the Lord to help me because I didn't know what to do. I didn't even think or even imagine that a Christian like myself, a Christian like you, could get depressed. Why would you, when the God of heaven is on your side? And God used a passage in Matthew chapter 11, verse 28 through verse 30, particularly as written out in the paraphrase Bible that is the Message by Eugene Peterson. It's not one that you come across often. It was Eugene Peterson's attempt to write out the scriptures in common layman's language in a way that we can understand and it applies to us directly. And so no King James English in this. It's very down to earth. And he writes it, Matthew 11, 28 to 30. Are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion, and that was me? Come to me. Get away with me and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me and watch how I do it. Learn the enforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me and you'll learn how to live freely and lightly, which was the cry of my heart. Those words began me on a journey. They took me to the prophet Elijah, and last week I shared what I learned from Elijah and Elijah's story, that if you're in free fall and you're at that cliff edge that is burnout and depression, you do not keep going, you stop before you tip over. And in the language of Elijah's own seeming depression and burnout, if you're in a hole, stop digging. You don't dig yourself deeper in. But then that stopped my, fall into the hole itself. It was what the Lord taught me next that began to pull me out of my depression. It was what he taught me next that became the beginnings of my practices in the discipline of slowing down my life so that there could be strength and energy and recovery. In that passage in Matthew chapter 11, verse 28 through 30, the Lord says, "Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it." And I thought to myself, Lord, what do I watch? How can I learn from your life? You say, walk with me and work with me and watch how I do it. Where do I watch, Lord? And the Lord seemingly led me back to the book of Genesis, the very beginning of creation. Because it was in Genesis chapter 1 and chapter 2 that we see God at work, creating the universe and the world that we know today. And I asked, Lord, what can I learn from the creation that will help me in my depression and in my burnout? Let me read the first 8 verses of the story in Genesis. The first 10 verses of the story in Genesis. And I want to draw out 4 truths from it that became, in a sense, the landing port or the first steps into recovery. Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 to 10, and I believe I'm reading from the New International Version. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty, and darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. The Lord said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning the first day. And God said, "Let there be a vault between the waters to separate the water from water." So God made a vault and separated the water under the vault, and then the water above it. He separated the water into 2. And so it was. God called the vault sky. And there was evening, and there was morning the second day. Verse 9, and God said, "Let the water under the sky be gathered in one place, and let dry ground appear." God called the dry ground land, and the gathered waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning the third day. This is God at work. What can we learn from the book of Genesis? Well, when God began his work of creation, the original source material that he had at hand to work with is defined as formless and void. In other words, it was a mess. The New International Version that we're reading says, "The earth was formless and empty. Darkness hovered or covered the surface of the deep." If you read the Living Bible translation, it puts it even more graphically. It says, "The earth was a shapeless, chaotic mess, and the Spirit of God brooded over it, over the dark vapors." God had to work with a chaotic mess. That's why he begins. It was just a mess. The world was a mess. And in my burnt out stage, I thought to myself, I feel like a chaotic mess, formless and void, a life with no shape in my burnout. I felt as though I was being pulled in 50 different directions by the demands of my ministry, and I didn't have the strength to do it. I had too many competing demands, all crying out for my attention. I was drained after every meeting that I attended, whether it was Zoom. I used to say in those days, I'm zoomed out by Zoom. I don't even want to do Zoom because it just drained me. Did you know that the English word that we use today, priority, when it was first coined up, it was supposed to be used in the singular. You had a priority. You had one priority. We don't use the word that way anymore today, because if you ask somebody, what they'll say is, I have 15 priorities on my to-do list. We use it in the plural. It was never intended to be used in the plural. It couldn't be used in the plural. But we have, if I may say this, and I don't know whether my tongue will allow me, we have pluralized. Wow. We have pluralized. I did it. I'm from Muranga. We have plural. Okay, Trace is good enough. We've made it a plural word, which it was never supposed to be. Everything is a priority today. Everything needs attention, and everything was burning me out. But Jesus says, okay, work with me and watch how I do it. So what did God do at the creation? God took this mess that was the world, and he began to separate the elements into their different form. And out of chaos, he brought about order. Genesis chapter 1 verse 1. God said, let there be light, and there was light. God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. Picture with me, going into, for those of you who have been parents for a while, not the ones who are up here, going into, and for the ones up here, this is going to be you, okay? Going into your teenager's room, 15 years old, and it is a mess. There's something about teenagers and chaos. It is a mess. We've raised our kids. We now have 4 kids who are all grown up. And with one of our kids, my wife used to literally pull out her hair from the sockets because of the stress she felt when she'd go into this daughter's room. And I, the ever wise one, would tell her, if you don't want to be stressed, don't go into their rooms. Very, very helpful advice. But picture with me going into your messy teenager's room, and the place looks like Genesis chapter 1 and verse 1. Formless and void. No structure at all. And darkness. A strange cloud, a strange smell hovers over the deep, which is a pile of dirty clothes and dried up food and plates under the bed. What did God do? God took the dirty clothes and he put them in the laundry basket. And then he took all the smelly shoes and put them on the shoe rack. And then he took all the books spewed around the room and he put them on the shelf. And then he took the bed sheets, both those on the bed and those under the bed, and he made the bed with them. How was God working? He was dividing the elements and turning chaos into order, separating the elements and putting them in their right place. The first act to taming the chaos in your life is tidying up. Separate and conquer. Divide and rule the chaos. Break it down into its smaller components and set them in order. And so as I saw Genesis chapter 1 and verse 1, I asked myself, where does the feeling of chaos in my life overwhelm me? Where is it coming from? Why am I feeling so undone, as though my life is falling apart? There were 3 obvious places where this was true in my life. And the first of those was my schedule. Trying to hold everything together, the time demands, the fact that there were so many meetings, so many things to attend to, so many sermons to prepare, so many people to comfort, so many people, particularly in that COVID time, in need of visiting. I was at a place where I was feeling compassion fatigue, and everybody wants a piece of me, and my schedule was not helping me. But the second was my finances. We were all worried. Is this the end of the world? How long is this going to go on? Will we survive? We were told that, this lockdown may be long. And I wondered, what will we do with the pastors? With no church, with no gatherings, there is no support. I prepared my pastors and told them, guys, with the reserves we have, we can probably keep going for another 3 months. But after that, jitegeme. Begin to prepare. And I told my pastors, if you have land in the rural areas, if you have land here in the city, grow your food and save the cash that you have, for this may be a long while coming. My finances were really stressful. Then there was all my meetings. We were doing Zoom meetings all over the place, trying to record the services now and put them out virtually and etc., and it was wearying. But God in Genesis chapter 1 separates and conquers. He divides and rules, and the chaotic mess that was the earth, formless and void, became a beautiful place. And so I say to myself, okay, I need to unclutter my finances. You need to unclutter your schedule. We need to unclutter our goals and bring order to them, and unclutter your mind, and unclutter your social obligations and the demands that they're making on you. Unclutter your timetable and unclutter your physical living space and your desk. Oftentimes for me, when my study and my office at home is untidy, it can tell you what state I'm in. And so tidy it up. Most of you take Saturday and Sunday off as your day, as your weekend. As a pastor, Saturday and Sunday are very demanding, busy days for pastors. And so I take off Monday and Tuesday for my weekend. I work on Saturday and Sunday, but I take off Monday and Tuesday off. My Sabbath day is actually on Tuesday. But Monday is what I call my pre-Sabbath. Because among the Jews who would honor the Sabbath beginning with night on Friday evening and going through Saturday until evening on Saturday evening, that was a Sabbath day. Okay, very much like the Lord in Genesis chapter 1. You notice that it says it was evening, it was morning, the first day. God begins his day at 6 a.m. sunset. And it ends at 6 p.m. sunset, and his day begins with night, and then it ends the next day at 6 p.m. and ends with the day. We do different. We begin our day with the morning, and then it ends, in the evening. I like God's way because I've often said, God begins with rest. And when he is rested, he gets up to work. Rest comes before work. We do it the opposite day. We begin with work when the sun comes up. And then when we're worn out and tired in the evening, we're trying to rest so that we can get ready for the next day. Well, the Jews would follow that timetable that was God's. The Sabbath would begin with nightfall. But they would use the day before the Sabbath to get ready, because on the Sabbath, they would not cook, they could not go out, they could not do shopping, they could not get groceries. It was a Sabbath day. And so you did all the work prior to the Sabbath on the day before. And that's why I call it a pre-Sabbath. And so I took this up and I said, okay, my Sabbath is on Tuesday. Monday will be my day to tidy up my life, tidy up my desk, tidy up my room, tidy up my schedule, tidy up my week, tidy up my demands, tidy up my finances, so that when the Sabbath comes, I can really rest and I do not carry over my chaos into my day of rest. This was the first truth, and I began to become disciplined about honoring the Sabbath, but also sorting out the mess in my life and the chaos. The second thing that we see in Genesis is that you read in verse 1 to 8, verse 3 to 8, God said, let there be light, and there was light, and he called the light, day, and he called the night, or rather called the darkness night. And then it says, there was evening and there was morning the first day. In verse 8 again, after the second day, there was evening and there was morning the second day. And then the third day in verse 13, there was evening, there was morning the third day. And then in verse 19, there was evening, there was morning the fourth day. And it keeps going until the seventh day. And what God is doing is on a 24-hour schedule, he was setting a rhythm to order his days. What are rhythms and why are they important to help us? Rhythms are the repetitive, repeated tasks and order you do day by day, week by week, month by month that allow you to get things done and keep things in balance without having to expand a ton of energy and creative effort. Rhythms allow you to build your life around predictable patterns. Good rhythms conserve your energy. Bad rhythms where one day does not look like the next. Bad rhythms where you slept at 9 p.m. in the evening today and you're sleeping at 2 p.m. or 2 a.m. in the morning the next day, then you're back to 10 p.m., then you're back to 3 a.m. Those bad rhythms eventually drain you and waste your energy and potential. Now we're surrounded by rhythms, seen and unseen. For example, the cycle of weather year by year has a rhythm to it. Here in Kenya, we talk about the short rains and the long rains. In the Northern Hemisphere, you talk about summer and autumn and winter and spring. There is a rhythm. And the weather rhythm allows you to plan the year. As a farmer, the rhythm of the year is essential for you to be able to produce a harvest. You don't just wake up one morning and say, I feel like planting today. And then one day, I feel like harvesting. You follow the rhythm. The rhythm works for you. And if you submit to the rhythm, then as a farmer, it brings order into your life. And you get fruit as a result. Rhythms are your friends. Another powerful rhythm is that we're all subject to a biorhythm, the circadian cycle. Your body wakes up in the morning. And when you wake up in the morning, God has made your body so that there are hormones, chemicals that help you wake up and get ready for the day. And if you follow the rhythm, then you wake up refreshed. When you come to nightfall, there is a production of a hormone like melatonin that helps you prepare to fall asleep and keeps you asleep. There are rhythms in our biological cycles. Your biorhythm gives you what I would call a trellis, okay? A trellis is, let me give an example, okay? You want to grow passion fruit. Now, passion fruit is a vine. And if you plant the passion seeds in the ground, they spring up, but they will spread all over the place. And without something to cling on to and climb upwards, they will never really flower or fruit. And so you always plant them near a trellis, some structure that they can clamber on and hold themselves up. Whether it's a fence or it's a chain link or it's a wooden trellis, something they can hold onto. And when they do, then they flower and they bring forth fruit. Your life needs a trellis that will hold it up so that you can flower and so that you can bear fruit. That's what a rhythm is. You fight your rhythms and it will wear you down. We have a daily rhythm. Waking up and going to sleep, working at your best. There's a slump in the afternoon where you need a new surge of, glucose or carbohydrates, whatever it is. And we have a weekly rhythm. And the weekly rhythm that God set in place at the creation is you shall work for 6 days and on the seventh you will rest. And then work for 6 days and the seventh you will rest. Ignore that rhythm and it will lead you to burnout. He established rhythms for the day, the week, the Sabbath, the celebration rhythms, because there were several celebrations that God set in place through the course of the year. where people, after the harvest, would have a party. And God's parties were 7 days long. They were not short parties. They were 7 days long. And then there is the seventh year, the sabbatical year that was set as a rhythm. And there was no planting and no harvesting in the seventh year. Then there was a 49th year that was also set as part of the rhythm every 50 years. They were all part of his design. So, for my burnout, I asked myself, what are the rhythms I have in place to sustain me? What work rhythms do I need to build into my life? And here are a few that I installed into my life, thinking about what God had done. Watch him, seeing the rhythms that he set in place. The first was a morning rhythm, or what is called a morning routine. I get up in the morning, oftentimes it's before daybreak when the house is quiet, and I sit on a special seat. Everywhere I travel, I try and assign one place that is sacred space for me, where I will meet with God consistently. And there's a seat in my study. Can't work from it because it's a comfortable seat, it's low down. But it is my sacred space when I get up in the morning and I sit on that seat and I come before the Lord in prayer. And I practice the prayer of solitude and silence. No words. I don't ask for anything. I simply want to be in the presence of God. And after about half an hour, 45 minutes, I move from there and I take my morning walk. Remember what we said last week? Good thing about exercise is that it fills you with all the epinephrines that you need to raise your mood and lift up your countenance. And so I go for my morning walk. I come back and I have my coffee. Amazing. And after that, I sit down for about the next 3 or 4 hours just to be in the presence of God, to read his word, and to pray. Now, maybe you're working for a bank. You're not going to get 3 hours to sit and read the Bible, okay? That's me. This is my profession. This is my background. This is my career. I have that privilege. It doesn't need to be 3 hours for you, but there is a morning rhythm as I get up, a rhythm that energizes me. And then I have an evening rhythm to shut down, where I eat my dinner at about 4 o'clock at the latest, maybe 5 o'clock, so that I have cleared my stomach contents by the time I go to sleep. And I oftentimes will, slow down, take an hour in the evening to just read the Bible from cover to cover and prepare myself for sleep. And the idea of it, to make it a rhythm, is that it happens at the same time. And my feelings of sleepiness should come at the same time. I build that rhythm into my life. I have a weekly rhythm, a timetable that repeats itself now. And I didn't used to have this. And so on Monday is my pre-Sabbath day. I'm cleaning up the chaos in my life. On Tuesday, I stop. And you remember how in the Old Testament God says that on the Sabbath, your donkey, your maidservant, your manservant, and everyone and everything in your life is supposed to stop. Well, you don't have donkeys and maidservants and manservants and such. But we have the equivalent. On your Sabbath, your phone should stop. That's your donkey. Your car should stop. Don't go anywhere. And you rest for the Sabbath. And so on Tuesday, I have my Sabbath. On Wednesday, I focus on all the, administrative work I need to do, the files, the readings, the reports, the feedback, the emails. Those I do on Tuesday. On Wednesday. On Thursday, I go for meetings. All my meetings are on a Thursday. And I have as many as I need to, but they take place on a Thursday. On Friday is my sermon preparation and my reflection time and my reading of books to, read deep. Saturdays, I visit people and I meet with people because it's easiest to catch them on the weekend than on the weekdays. And then on Sunday is church and ministry. That's my weekly rhythm. It's not a perfect rhythm, but it works for me. And I can change things around when I need to. But if you ever try to catch me for a meeting on a Tuesday, You won't even get through because my phone is dead on Tuesday. Okay, my donkey has a day of rest. Okay, but you also won't catch me easily on a Friday when I'm trying to spend time alone with God to prepare my messages and etc., etc. I have a monthly rhythm that repeats itself every month. In the 4 weeks, the last month is a week that I now catch up with things I wasn't able to do in the other 3 weeks. Every fourth week of my month is a catch-up week where I just work through the things that are still piled up on my desk. I make my rhythms respect my energy levels. Sundays especially tend to be extremely demanding on pastors. All the people you're meeting, all the stories you're hearing, we expend a ton of energy meeting people and caring for some, comforting others, visiting in the afternoon, running the services. By evening, many pastors just crush because they're so tired. Monday can be discouraging. They say that if a pastor ever submits a letter of resignation on a Monday, don't take it seriously. It's just a Monday blues, If he does it on Tuesday, you're in trouble. But if he does it on Monday, just, tell him, Paule. It's just that he's depressed because he's so worn out. But for the Sunday and the recognition of Monday, I do two things. One is on a Sunday, I eat a very healthy breakfast because I know the energy I'm going to expend. But then on a Monday, I also fill up the barns again. If you ever want to catch me nyamachomaring, it's always on a Monday when I nyamachoma to replenish my energy. In the last 2 years, I'm trying to learn the rhythms of even the year. And so my year works out easily. Every even-numbered month, like February, the 2nd month, April, the 4th month, June, the 6th month, I hold all my meetings, conferencing, appointments, and people. But every odd-numbered month, that's January, March, May, every odd-numbered month, I disappear. And I go into seclusion. In January, I focus on my team and where we're going this year, and it's just about my team. In March is my month of prayer and fasting and solitude, and it's best done when I am not in the crowds. And so I go away for a month to pray and to spend time with God. In May, it's my month of reading and deep thought and writing papers and doing the think work that I need to do. July is my annual leave, and again, I disappear. You will not catch me in July. What rhythms are you establishing in your life so that you do not burn out? Your children force a rhythm on you because of the school calendar. How have you incorporated that into your life without trying to fight it? Do you have annual rhythms of holidays and rest? Or do you charge through all of them with work? Ladies, you have a monthly rhythm that is a reality you have to live with, and whether you embrace it or not, it's part of who you are. Are you just trying to power through it and pretend it doesn't exist and it doesn't drain you and make you feel terrible? Or can you embrace it and make it part of your monthly rhythms? This was the second thing. And I looked at my life and I began to put my life into rhythms. The last one that I've been really working on is my morning rhythm. And I think I've got it now, and it's in place. The third thing that you see in Genesis is that God does not work alone. He works in teams. The first ever reference we have in the Bible of the Trinity is in the book of Genesis, in verse 26, where God says, finally at the creation of man, let us make man in our image. He's not solo. This is God the Father and God the Son and God the Holy Spirit communing together for the creation of man, giving their attributes that they hold to man who was, in a sense, the epitome of his creation. God does not work solo. In fact, the one time in the creation narrative where God looks on what he had created and he says, "It is not good," was when he made man. And he looked at all the animals and he gave man the mandate to name all the animals. But as he looked at Adam, he said, "It is not good that man is alone." Now, we often think of the creation of Eve as a passage that, we look at it as a passage from a marital or sexual or gender perspective. But that in part is missing the point. Yes, it was that. But the fact was not, it is not good for man not to have somebody opposite him who is a woman or different from him. No. God said it is not good for him to be alone. We were not created to work solo, to live solo. It was because man had no companion that God created Eve. It's about belonging. It's about deep friendships. It's about community. And the Trinity is about a community of very deep relationships between the members of the Trinity. Loneliness today has become a huge problem, especially in our modern world. In England, about 10 years ago, they appointed a minister of loneliness. Can you imagine? Why? Because it's become a huge problem, particularly in Western societies where the sense of community has been fragmented, especially in urban centers, where you grow up with your workmates that you think are your community, but the day you retire, they don't know you from Adam. And your friendships come to an end. And all you have is your little abode, and you age out in your abode, and nobody ever comes to see you. Nobody ever talks to you. And so you hear stories of people who passed away and their cats ate them because they had nothing else to eat in the house. It's become a huge problem. It's being recognized increasingly that among the elderly, the two things that they really struggle with, and we'll all get here one day. One is the fear of falling and what falling can do for you or to you. If you break your hip and etc., there is no recovery in old age for broken bones. But the second is loneliness. So many of us who created wealth, and we went and bought 5 acres out in the country, and we built this huge mansion, but the people around us are not our community, they're not our friends. And when you age, and you're too old to get in a car and go and visit, Mama so-and-so, she's too old to come and visit you, you will age out alone. And it's a huge problem. A friend of mine shared a thought some time back, and I think I've shared this with you before, where he told me, as a leader, 80% of the things that pass your desk do not belong to you. They belong to people who are, junior to you. It is their work to get those things done, okay? 80% of all the decisions and all the issues and all the problems that come on your desk are not really yours. If you spend your time, deciding and determining that 80%, then you are overpaid and underworking. Give it to the people that it belongs to. And then he went on to tell me that 15% of what remains does not belong to you either. It belongs to your senior leadership. Your head of HR, your head of, finances, or whoever else, your senior leadership. They manage the 15% that the junior staff don't, touch. Your job as the CEO is to do the 5% that nobody else in the organization can do. And if you don't do your 5%, then what you have in effect is a leaderless organization that will go adrift because you're not doing your job. 5%. You can tell a good top leader because they seem to live a lazy life. And anytime you go into a meeting and the top leader comes in last and goes out first, that's a sign of a leader who doesn't know what they're there for. Good leaders do not live a busy life. Okay, back to my burnout. I sat and I wrote down all the teams that surround me. And I came up with a list of 12 different teams work with me as a bishop. The first of those, of course, are the elders. And they have an important role as a top board that I work with. They make the top decisions, the difficult decisions. Together we process things. And then there is the people who work in my office. And I have some of the longest serving members of our staff working in my office. We've been together for 15 years or more. And then there is a bishop's council, which is all my top, pastors in the different churches where we meet together and we're making decisions that are pastoral decisions that concern people, that concern ministry. Then there are the prayer warriors who surround me. And there are the bosom friends that I have and the stretcher bearers. And probably most important of all is my lifelong companion, my wife, who has made a commitment to walk with me my whole life long. And I too with her. There is no deeper loyalty than this. And so I had to ask myself, with 15 different teams, why am I burning out? Is it that I've become such a bad or poor leader that I am micromanaging everyone and everything has to pass by my desk before a decision is made? That could be one reason why I'm burning out. Or it could be that I have not empowered anyone around me. And so yes, they have the title, they have the job, but they don't know how to do it because they're not empowered, so it has to come back to my desk. We started saying with one another in my office, with the people who have been around me for 15 years, this is not part of my 5%. The reason why you're paid the amount you're paid for your salary is because you go and have your sleepless nights over that issue. This one is not mine. My 5%, this is your 5%. And yes, if you're completely stuck, we can sit down and have a conversation. But I need you to go and process this and make determinations around this. What about you and the teams that you have around you? Maybe you have an assistant in the office that you don't get along with. Then move them. If you don't get along with them, they don't get along with you. They don't enjoy their work, but they can't say anything about it. You can do something about it. Move them somewhere else in the organization and take somebody that really resonates with you. Or maybe it's that you have somebody who you can't move and you don't get along. Well, then you need to work on that relationship and move it from the place where there is no love lost between you to a place where there is trust and care and concern. Do something about it. Fourth principle, and this one is what I conclude with today. I should go to the Sabbath, but I want to come to the Sabbath alone because it is such an important part of avoiding burnout. So I'll take another principle from Genesis. And you first see this principle, I first clued onto it in Psalm chapter 104, verse 7 through to verse 9. It is a psalmist talking about God's third day of creation. And he says this, at your rebuke, at God's rebuke, the waters fled. At the sound of your thunder, they took to flight. They flowed over the mountains. They went down into the valley to the place you assigned for them. You set a boundary they cannot cross. Never again will they cover the earth. This was God taking the waters that were on the land and the land was not visible, and he takes them down into the valley and he creates the sea. In Jeremiah chapter 5, same thought in verse 22. I made the sand a boundary for the sea, an everlasting barrier it cannot cross. The waves may roar, but they cannot prevail. They may roar, but they cannot cross that barrier. I love the sea. I told you last week that when I go to my wilderness to be alone with God where nobody can reach me, I go down to Malindi, to a little cottage that my wife and I purchased. And there's no one around us. And we don't speak to anyone for a week, which is exactly what I need. I love the sea. And being on the seashore is deeply therapeutic to my soul. But as I sit on the seashore, I think of this passage because I look at the sea and I can see far out towards the horizon where the coral reef is, the waters begin to foam, and you can often sometimes see a white line out at the coral reef, okay? The waters begin to foam at the mouth and begin to gather their strength. And the sea rallies its troops and it begins to pick up momentum and to rush towards the shore. And it comes faster and faster and faster. And as it approaches the shore, it begins to rally its war cry. It roars. It rises up in a wave higher and higher. And menacingly threatening, angry, it races to the shore and it crushes on the shore. But it can never overcome the sand barrier that God put. And when its energy is spent, it begins to recede back with its tail in between its legs, back into the sea. And it goes out to sea again, and then it begins all over again. And for eons, the sea has tried to overcome this barrier that God set, because God said, "Thus far you will come, and no further." And I guess what this passage said to me is, where are the barriers I have set in my life that say to my work, "Thus far you may come and no further"? And so I began to put some barriers that I had never done in my ministry before. Number one, I do not work for more than 8 hours a day. Because when I do, it spills over into my family time, into my relationship with my wife. It begins to consume my life. There is no exercise. There are no friends to follow up. It's all work, 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 work. So I said, "Thus far my work may come." 8 hours and no further. And I count the number of hours I put in a week. Guys, you only pay me for 40 hours a week. You don't pay me for the 41st hour. Let's talk about overtime. Maybe I'll do a 41st hour if you give me. But I count the number of hours. I quit work at 5 p.m. And I leave the office when I'm in the office. I quit at 5 and I go home. I do not take on evening engagements. Why? Partly because it's becoming harder and harder to drive at night. I'm now 64 years old and I can never see the edge of the road. You know, I can never see where the road ends. And because here in Kenya we don't mark the edge of the road, you sort of know you're on the edge when you start feeling, the car is going like this. And so I don't drive at night. I really try and avoid night driving. I try and be home before the sun sets. And I don't work on public holidays. Those are a gift from the government, hallelujah, and I will enjoy them. And I don't work on my leave. I try and rest with my wife. We always take our leave together, and it's a month down at the coast alone. We walk the beach, we enjoy conversations, but we try and keep work away. My evenings belong to my wife. Wow. I'm 64 now. I'm 64 now and she's 63. We're on a countdown. I figure God's grace, if He's good to me, I have another 20 years to live. And I want to enjoy these years as we age. And so I do not do work in the evenings to the best of my ability. My evenings belong to my wife. My mornings belong to the Lord and to self-care. And so I told you last week that my phone goes off at 6 p.m. in the evening and it comes back on at 12 noon so that I can have my time undivided in the evening with my wife and I can have my time undivided with God in the morning. If you ever want to catch me, it's going to happen between midday and it's going to happen between that and 6 o'clock in the evening before my phone automatically switches off. And it's not even on Monday and Tuesday. It's off. Thus far you can come and no further. I have to tame my work enablers also. And the phone is one. The phone interrupts every conversation. It barges into every appointment. And so, I have to tame the enablers that make me overload. Social media and reading books on ministry and leadership, those are not for me in these hours. Secondly, I use a calendar, a very strict calendar. I'd sort of done a screenshot of my calendar, maybe it will go up, but it contains everything. It contains everything, including my downtime, my rest time, my time to get to meetings, my time for soul care, my gym time, my walks, my time alone with my wife, my time with God, everything. And the idea of it is that even my margin times are completely taken up. And I don't carry a diary. When I first ever learned how to use a calendar, I used to carry my diary, even on my phone. I don't do that anymore. Somebody taught me a trick. He told me, don't carry a diary. Why? Why wouldn't you carry a diary? Because as Africans, we have a hard time saying no to anybody. We're a shame culture. It's hard to say no to somebody. And so we always say yes. But if you don't have your diary, then you can tell them, I don't have my diary with me. Can I go home and look at it and get back to you? And it's much easier to say no on WhatsApp. So I don't carry my diary. I always tell, let me go and look at my diary, and I will get back to you and whether we can meet at the time you want us to meet. There are other boundaries that I needed to draw. I'll give you 3 other boundaries very quickly, okay? The second boundary, the first was work, okay? And the second boundary is my dreams. I came across this saying not too long ago, about a year ago, in a book I was reading, and it said, there is not enough time in your lifetime to fulfill all the dreams you have in your heart. So slow down your life by picking up the top 50% of your dreams and canceling all the others. That house you want to build out in the country that you don't have the money, you don't have the time, and you don't have the energy, cancel it out. And cancel out those dream bucket listings like traveling to, exotic places in the world, and cancel out that car you want to buy in 2 or 3 years' time. Cancel. You can only accomplish 50% of your dreams in the life remaining before you. But the problem for many of us is we have too many dreams, and they plague us, and they haunt us at night. And I'm feeling pressured because I need to get onto this. If I'm going to build that house and live in it, I'm now 40. This is a time. I'm 50. I'm running out of time. By 60, I'll build it, but I'll never enjoy it. And just cancel those things. A third was my social boundaries. I'm a pastor. There are 4,000 people in this church, in this site. If I now add in Karen and Roiro and Gong Hills and all the other churches, I think we number about 25,000 people in the chapel churches. I'm the bishop of all these people. And being a pastor, I don't know how to say no. If you ask me for an appointment, I will almost always say, we need to get together. Fortunately, I don't carry my diary. Now, the problem is, when you have a birthday for your daughter or your granddaughter, you invite me to come and give you apostolic bishopric blessings. But, I don't even know this daughter or this granddaughter. When you have a wedding, I need to be there. I don't know how to say no. When there's a funeral, I'm invited. And I carry a lot of guilt because of my social obligations, because I can't be there for 4,000 people plus every time. I'm trying to live a life with clear boundaries, learning from Genesis, learning from Psalm. And for that reason now, I do have boundaries. When you tell me, we have a wedding and would like you to come, Bishop, I tell you, oh, praise the Lord. I had an appointment. What I don't tell you is that appointment is with my daughter, is with my son, or is with my, son-in-law, or is with my wife, or is with God. I don't tell you that. I just say, my schedule is full. I have an appointment, and so I can't be there. Now, of course, I do go to some weddings, but I can't be there for 4,000 weddings. Many years ago, the elders told me, you are not to conduct any more weddings. We forbid you from conducting weddings because they're consuming your life. And we have other people who can do that. Now, if you have really good nyama choma, then maybe I will come. Okay? But I have to put a boundary and to say, like God, thus far you can come and no further. And that's not to say that I ignore my pastoral responsibilities. I know them and I seek to fulfill them. But I can't be the pastor of everyone. It's just not humanly possible. And it's what is burning me out. And so thus far you can come and no further. My question to you is, what boundaries have you put in place around your life to protect your mental health, to protect your family and the time they need, to protect your marriage? Or have you become a workamaton that is headed for burnout? That was me. I'm learning to be otherwise. Let's turn our thoughts to God in prayer. Father, as I leave these words with your people, my prayer is that they would go, and he who has ears would hear. That they would sit down and process and begin to put boundaries and barriers, begin to take charge of the chaos in their life and to order it. That, Father, you'd give them wisdom to know how to apply these principles of working in teams, of establishing their lives in rhythms that will energize them and refresh them. Instead of what the world calls us to work and work and work and work, and everything around us dies as a result. Would you go with them and speak into their hearts and into their lives? For couples who are here, may they sit down and ask, where do we draw boundaries for the sake of our children, for the sake of our marriage? For friends who know friends who work unreservedly, to go and sit down and say, where have you drawn boundaries? Because you're going to burn out at this rate. Give us wisdom. Bless our week before us, for we pray this in Jesus' precious name. Amen. God bless you guys.